Good afternoon, and welcome to the 40th CALLERLAB Convention in Cary, North Carolina. Today is Monday, March 25th, 2013, and this is the Calling to Music session. My name is Patty Greene, and I'm your moderator, and your panelists today are Jim Mayo and Johnny Wedge, and we will be discussing how to use music and call to music to give your dancers a good dance experience as opposed to a drill. So without further ado, we will get started because I'm sure you want to hear what they have to say.
That's all you're going to say?
Right
now? Yeah, I have to start talking so he can adjust the volume. We have a handout of copies for. It is essentially the section that was written as part of the training manual for caller coaches. And it was, I was the editor of that manual when it got written 20 years ago, 25, a while ago. And one of the subjects that we had a great deal of discussion about was music, because, well, callers, many of them think of themselves as musical experts. When it came down to the technical details, they and I didn't know as much as we thought. I'd played a musical instrument in bands and orchestras and all those good things, but I wasn't really sure, and we got in some interesting discussions about this piece of paper, which was designed to tell caller coaches what they needed to know in order to teach callers. I decided after I'd written the first draft that I'd better share the responsibility, and fortunately we had in one of my clubs a dancer who had graduated from the Yale School of Music with a degree in music, and I asked him to review and correct the facts, and the result was a pretty detailed, more than you want to know probably, piece of paper that talks about square dance music. I will turn this one over to somebody when we're done. Most of you got a copy, but we will see if we can get CALLERLAB to print a couple more copies or a few more and make them available in the office tomorrow. Question? Is this in the CD? No, it's not. No, it's not. I got it in too late for that and realized that this was the right thing to hand out for this session, but we had a little trouble deciding what to do with this session, and I think what we've come up with is a pretty good resolution. The Square Dance Foundation of New England has a very substantial collection of tapes, both reel-to-reel and cassette tapes, of callers of all sorts, from many of them from very early in the square dance activity, and we have been, over the past several years, diligently digitizing, making MP3 copies of these tapes, and we have a huge collection. Johnny Wedge is the computer manager for the foundation, and he has put them all in, and we have a vast storehouse. So we went through that storehouse in part to take single tip clips from those tapes that illustrate how many different callers have used music in many, many different ways. It turns out that in our business, the fundamentals of rhythm, melody, and harmony are still essential ingredients, but how we use those and how we interact with the rhythm and the melody and the harmony is unique to each one of us. And we have a fascinating collection of clips to play for you that illustrate some of those differences. One of the things it says on the front of the handout is that rhythm is determined in music by the time signature, and that's the thing you see at the front that's a 4/4 or 2/4. The most common song time signature is 4/4. And there's been a folklore in square dancing that most square dance singing calls were 2/4. It's only folklore. I have a fake book, one of those things that they put out that gives you the melody line and the chords for 500 songs in one book. And I went through that fake book looking for 2/4 songs. There are hardly any. It turns out most of our music is either 4/4 or cut time, which is essentially the same thing, but instead of a quarter note having a one beat value, it's a half note. And so it's 2/2 instead of 4/4. In 4/4, the quarter note gets one beat, and there are 4 of them in a measure. All of that doesn't make a whole lot of difference to us. What it sounds like can be changed a lot by an orchestra playing it, and the activity of it. One desperate example of that for me was an early recording that I made. I fell in love with the song Dream a Little Dream, and I asked the record company to make me a copy of it so I could do it, and I said I really want it in cut time, and it turns out I didn't want it in cut time. I wanted it in 4/4, played at the right rhythm. It was a disaster. It's out there. They spent enough money getting the music, so they put it out, but it's not one I want to spread widely. It turns out that Kip Garvey came out very shortly afterward, and his was in 4/4 time. It's been one of my favorites ever since. Is that it? That's Kip Garvey's. Play it for him. Can you make that switch? And it was, as I hoped it would be, like summer sounds. And above me, yeah. That's 4/4 time, and that's the way it should have been played. You can get in a lot of trouble by switching from 4/4 to 2/4 unless you know what you're asking for. So that's the nature of rhythm. But one of the first things I want to let you listen to is a rhythm that was fairly popular a long time ago. This is going to be Bruce Johnson 6/8. And this is a recording from 1957. Bruce Johnson was one of our really great musical callers from Santa Barbara, California. And he did this recording using a 6/8 rhythm for the patter call. Now, we talk about that being possible, but as you listen to this, imagine yourself trying to do it. All set. Okay, good. It's a perfectly good tempo. It's about the speed that we normally dance. 6/8 breaks into units of a beat for every 3 notes, and you can dance to it pretty comfortably. It doesn't feel different. It just sounds different, and that sound can make it seem different. While we're talking about Bruce, one of the things we've lost over the years from the earliest of singing calls, the best of them, tried to make the call delivery, the words we used in the call, match the sound of the song. We call that metering. It's the way the rhythm of the words matches the rhythm of the song. And one of the best examples of doing that well is a recording that Bruce made, Me and My Shadow, back also in the early 60s or late 50s. But it's one of the best examples I've ever seen or heard of the metering of the call matching the metering of the original song. Now listen to the figure.
Head couples cross straight through. You turn back, star through. Circle half of them, pass through. Star through. Cross trail through. You turn back, star through. Circle four, go halfway around the floor. Dive through and substitute. Star through again. Cross trail the swing. And promenade home with me. And a shadow.
Yeah, good. It's a busy figure and uses figures, calls that we don't use anymore. But the metering of the word almost exactly fits the metering of the original song words. And it was a skill that's one of the best examples of it, but it wasn't that uncommon that callers tried to make their call delivery fit the music. And we've become a little less concerned with that over the years. One alternative way of approaching that question is a call here by Bill Kastner. And Bill Kastner was from Concord, California. He had a belt made out of silver dollars. I think it was 50 of them. He was a pretty substantial fellow. Yeah. But in this one, in the patter call, he is talking the directions and then switching into a singing delivery to provide some musical sound. The patter call, yeah. Just an interesting musical up and down. He's following the melody, sort of. In many singing calls and many patter calls, there are essentially three different chords, and he's alternating between those three different calls. It's essentially three different notes that he's using in there. In contrast with Marshall Flippo, in 1962, Marshall has developed over the years, but this one in 1962, a patter call, is really pretty much a single note all the way through. You get three of them in there. This is the 1962. Okay. Contrast that with the same caller in 1970, 8 years later. He's developed a slightly different style of delivery, much more melody, particularly on the right and left grand. essentially talks the call, but then sings on the right and left grand and follows the melody more on the right and left grand. But on the delivery of the calls for the pattern, for the action, he's really talking to you, not so much musically. Another caller who uses a single note delivery to nobody's great surprise is Les Gotcher. Over the years, we've known Les as Mr. Patter, and he delivers it pretty straight. This is from 1959. These are early recordings. One note all the way. That's it. All the way through. That's the note you get. But everybody knows that Les didn't do singing calls, right? Wrong. Listen to this one. Right on pitch, the rhythm's good. You wonder why he didn't do more singing calls. Yeah, he did. He worked with the movies and substituted for Clark Gable, I think, a couple of times. Did a stand-in for him. But he was Mr. Patter, and most of the time, 59 was fairly early. Later on, he did even fewer singing calls. It's pretty uncommon to have a recording of Les Gotcher doing a singing call. Interesting, one of the great singing callers, I dearly love many of his records, Jerry Haig. In Patter, it's pretty much a single note, but he switches back and forth between a single note straight line and then a several note variation. And
just listen, he is using the music to its greatest possibility. He's really using that music.
certainly the rhythm of it is it's just wonderful how he makes his delivery match the. Yeah. He uses it some there, but again, this is early. It's 1971. John just pointed out another point of this. In 71, we were just beginning to get the ability to change the music from the microphone. And Jerry does some of that, but very cautiously, and it doesn't hit you over the head with it. One of the things that drives me up a wall and keeps Joanne out of the hall is callers who up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, almost silent when they're talking, and then they deafen you with the music in between. That is misusing the music in the worst. Yeah, and it is mostly habit. interesting thing is you watch callers who do that regularly. If you just pull that plug out, they keep right on going with the thumb. It's going up and down like. It's just fascinating to me to listen to the way these callers use music. I think today you are less likely to hear that. There are some who today do an outstanding job. Many of them have been around since the 70s at least, but the really effective use of music is something that has at least weakened in our modern choreographic intensity. One of the early leaders, and part of what we're doing today is just giving you a chance to hear some of the great callers from way back when. One of those was Max Forsyth. He was a traveling caller, went pretty much all over the country, lived out of a station wagon. His whole life was the back of a station wagon. And we have Max way back near the beginning of the file. And his patter call here is pretty much only 3 notes, but he uses those 3 notes very effectively.
Well out of the corner. And
It's mostly 3 notes. It's, up, down, up, and all that. We have in New England a caller who has taken an entirely different approach to music and patter call. Some of you know John Hendren. John has his own style. He's one of the early ones to discover that dancers didn't know the difference in tempo if your timing was good. And John was one of the early ones to slow down his music. I've worked with him when he was running at about 116 beats a minute. More commonly 120, but never more than 124. And this is John, who loved to sing and loved to use the music, probably the most musical patter delivery of anyone that I know. John really wanted you to dance to the music. He had a gimmick, has still a gimmick that he uses that just sends the floor into ecstasy. He has a singing call, and you know the name of it, the one where he calls it all the way through. But what he does is put on a singing call and effectively patter calls the entire record. Never an allemande. Just Sweet Misery, I think it is, yeah. And he goes all the way through and comes out on the last chorus with the words of the song, finishes up just like a singing call. But it's the only allemande in the entire record. It goes all the way through and it just tears up the floor. They go absolutely berserk. They know he's doing it. They expect it. They've danced it to him many times, and he makes it come out right every single time. It's just one of the great ways that you can personally use music to make the whole dancing experience more effective. One particularly good friend of mine, Jack Jackson, stopped calling a long time ago, but he was a folk singer, played guitar after parties, and did wonderful folk. He put out a record of folk songs, some of them having to do with square dance after parties. That's hilarious. I've got a copy of it, but it's not in the public market. But here's Jack using a lot of melody variation in his patter call, and we're going to go. Can you find 6 minutes and 30 seconds? Does that show you on there? Does it show you the time? No. Okay. There may be a break at that point, but anyway, play the patter call. Here's a caller that wants to be musical. He wants you to feel this patter call as if it was a singing call. Yeah, okay. If you can find the break and pick up that... This is Babyface, yeah. Doing a singing call, same tip. If we can find it. You find a cut? Yeah. We had some pretty good tempos then. That's what you can do if you're a singer. And Jack was a great singer. One of the other interesting callers that everybody knows about is Joe Lewis. He was one of the founding members of CALLERLAB. Also was a musician by his own admission. He felt very strongly about it, and he invented an accordion that played lots of different styles of music, and he could use it in very effective ways. This is a piece of him doing a patter call, and then we'll follow that with a singing call, and both of them using his own accordion and his own delivery style, one that not many of us have any chance of duplicating. This is not a singing call. That's what you can do when you can make the music do what you want. Yeah, the only music there is his accordion. He created an accordion to play square dance music, and that was his instrument, and he did it all. Can you switch to the singing call? Yeah. He's playing the accordion as he's doing this.
Remembering his corner.
Yes. Well, we didn't do a lot of choreographic variation. This was probably the.
And when you meet your date, start
Praise in you. Yeah.
Jim, I never had the opportunity to see Joe Louis. That's okay. Did he stand while he was doing this, Jim, or did he sit? He stood with the accordion? Wow. As I tell you, I fooled around with an accordion for a while and played one, and I was so out of breath just playing it. I can't imagine he could play it and sing at the same time like that. Wow.
Yeah, he had it plugged in, and you know, it was an electric, and it was mic'd. Yeah, it had the mic mounted on the accordion. It's just an astounding show he put on. He also, at the end of the dance, often put on a musical after party, and he would announce that saying, you know, this has been your time, now it's my time. And if you don't want to listen, why don't you leave? Joe was a very outspoken chap with strong opinions, and he had some real problems with CALLERLAB when we first started out in 1974. New calls were coming along at the rate of 30 a month, and we were talking about how we were going to deal with that. We're going to make a mainstream list, and that was major discussion with the founding Board of Governors. And Joe told us very clearly that he'd been working very successfully for many, many years with 20 calls, and he didn't see any reason at all for us to do more than that. What he did was use his 20 calls every night, and each night with his group he would teach a new call that they never saw again. And I've had many times the thought that he might have been right. All that, however, takes us to one of the great patter callers with a very personal style, essentially one note, Earl Johnston. But certainly one of New England's best patter callers, who had a way of making the rhythm fit, but his greatest skill was perfect timing. You never, ever had to stop moving once you started an Earl Johnson patter tip, and it was just flawless. Amazing timing. It's just it's such a joy. I'll put an aside here, a plug for the Square Dance History website that I've been working on. We set out several years ago to make a website that showed Square Dance history in moving images. And we have over 400 videos on it and a whole bunch of audio, some of these clips and things like this. But one clip we have is of Earl Johnson calling. You can't see him, but I'm dancing in the square that you do see dancing, and it is another one of those just beautiful examples of timing. Nobody ever hesitates from the time they start the tip until they finish it. And we've got most of the tip on there in the video, and it's just, if you want to see what good timing looks like, that's it. In terms of music, one of the most respected was Dick Jones. And this is an example of a musical delivery by a very competent musical caller, patter call, but he uses lots of notes.
Just a general comment. These examples, these callers knew their music. I know for me, and Steve helps because he finds music that resonates with us. part of it is picking good music that you can call to and use patter. And you need to know that music. The big thing that was always drilled in me was, where do you put your sides, face, grand, square? And if you want a good example, if you want to do an experiment of a good example of a patter sequence that works with music or works without music, try calling sides, face, grand, square, not on the phrase. Stick it anywhere but on the 5, 6, 7, 8, sides, face, grand, square, and then they start on 1. And it's interesting because it's not as graceful. And we wonder why our dancers cut sides, face, grand, square. Well, it's because we don't let them start on the beat 1 of the phrase. And I know I've worked very hard, and I get angry with myself if I miss it. Because when I'm dancing, I'll adjust until I'm, okay, now I'm on a phrase. And I think that a lot of our square dancing, if we listened to the music, our patter, and even our singing calls, and we adjusted, it becomes obvious sometimes if you allow the music to dictate what you're doing. So if you have a piece of active music that's got a lot going on that you really like, you kind of simplify a little bit of the choreography. If you're doing something difficult, you use something that's more slow and steady wins the race. If there's I know a lot of the music today, they're using a lot of current music, and there's always blah, 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 wow, la, 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 wow. And if you can get it so that you do your Allman left and a right and left grand, so they start off on that right and left grand on the wow part, you're really using your music well because the dancers are dancing. They're not just, I get frustrated when I hear a caller put on a piece of music, and it's a good piece. It sounds like it's going to be a really great piece of music, and then they turn it down, and you never hear it till the end of the song. And it's like the music is just, it's not even a part of the tip. It's kind of over there, and I have to do it to keep a steady beat. And it's just not pleasant to dance to. It becomes more of a drill rather than a dance when you're dancing to the music.
Some callers have difficulty. We have a caller in New England who's been around a very long time. He's a very well-respected and much-liked caller. He started out a long time ago pretty close to tone deaf. He's worked very hard and has been able, but in this patter delivery, it's not particularly musical, but he's managed to learn how to use even a non-musical delivery that doesn't fight with the music, that makes it possible for the dancers to use the music, even though he has personal difficulty with music in his delivery. He shall remain nameless. For a guy who has trouble with music, that's a pretty good job. It's, and he's worked very, very hard to get there. One of the problems I have is that very often modern calling tends not to pay much attention, not to seem to use the music very well. And we have an example of that from fairly recently. That I don't think is particularly musical, in contrast to what we've been listening to from earlier times. I think what I'm going to play for you now is not that uncommon, unfortunately. My personal judgment. Go. there was a little musical bit there at the end, but much of the time in today's choreography and today's calling, we're so concentrated on the choreography that all we do is give the commands as a single word and you know, shout them out. But hopefully, and here he didn't run the music up and down. It was, he let you hear the music, but it didn't seem to be any connection, in my mind at least, what I was hearing, between the music and the way he was delivering the call, in contrast to many of the ones that we've heard before this. Another interesting, long ago, 1977, caller, guy who was highly respected as one of the best users of sight calling before sight calling was as common as it is today, Deuce Williams. And we have here a very spoken delivery, not unlike the one you just heard. Mostly he's using two notes, and his job is to deliver the choreography. Not a particularly effective use of the music, but I don't think it fights with it a whole lot. He's intent on the choreography quite clearly, and he doesn't fight with the music, and his rhythm is fine. Getting close to the end of what I have to say, but I've got to share one of my personal joys. Many of you know that I worked with and against Bill Peters many times. Bill and I were good friends, and we had somewhat different philosophies about choreography and a lot of other things. We shared caller schools all over the world, and Bill was exceptionally good at harmonizing. And the 1981 dance that we did just down the street in Atlanta, this is an example of how two callers can use the same piece of music jointly. Later, but I want to get to the section B call. I'm being greedy. In just a minute or two, it'll be me. Bill liked to use his music. I thought I was in there. Why don't you skip to the singing call? It's at 9:07. Oh, maybe you've got a different Bill Peters. Peters and Mayo, yeah? Yeah, it's a...
He gave you a chance.
Yeah, he never gave me a chance to call.
That's good working together, isn't it?
Bill Peters said, "Heck with you, Mayo."
It was fun to work with him because he also had a skill, an awareness that sometimes callers lose when they're working together trying to do harmony. He harmonized only when there was not an important call for the dancers to hear. He would cut his harmonizing abruptly, just stop, so that the call could come through and then pick it up again on the other side. Very few callers can do that effectively, but Bill was very, very good at it. The final one I want to play for you from our vast collection is one of the great recording artists of all time, Johnny Wyckoff. Ran the record company for a while, and he's doing good old Summertime. It's 4/4 time, as most of these singing calls were and are. But Johnny was very, very good. Notice that he fits the call to the metering of the song. Be my duty would see that good old summertime. Yeah. Okay, that's a trip through memory lane to see the way in which callers, most of these a long time ago, used the music. When you listen to these and think about the way we use music today, ask yourself if it wouldn't be good for us to use it more effectively, to let the dancers experience the feel of dancing. Just marching through routines is not my idea of dancing. The thing that makes it dancing is the music and the fit of the actions I'm taking to the music. You've just listened to a whole bunch of people doing a good job of that in very different ways. Much of today's calling, when you listen to it in records or tapes, doesn't have that kind of musical fit. Particularly in singing calls, there's a strong tendency, which I was enthusiastic about a long time ago, to use a different figure each time through the singing call. If you're doing that, you're probably not taking full advantage of the fit between the dancing action and the music, and the way your voice blends with the melody of the song. I would strongly urge that you look for ways to copy some of what you heard today in your own delivery. And as a comment, a suggestion on that, there's been a lot of talk about new music and how we ought to get away from this old music, although much of this sounds like fun to dance to me at least. But there are those who would like to use new music. Unfortunately, many of them don't have the match between their call and the music that this does. But there is one caller who's presenting, I think, right after us, isn't he? Ted's presentation? He's here. Ted, when's your presentation? Ted Lazat? Oh, you aren't talking about alternative music? What a shame. I have heard Ted talk about using alternative music, and he does it outstandingly well. He makes me think that alternative music might be okay. The way he does it is he knows his music absolutely. He knows every beat and every rhythm, and he sometimes even modifies them a little bit to make them go his way. But he makes alternative music sound comfortable for a guy as old as me, and that's a real art. If you ever get to hear him talk about how he does it, by all means, don't miss that presentation.
Oh, that's okay. I just think that I know some people get annoyed when we listen to old callers, older older style calling. But I do think that today, a lot of my peers, our peers, they really don't listen to the music. And I really think that you could put on a whatever, goofy piece of music on that record, and they wouldn't even know. They would just start, and once they start, they go, and when they decide it's time to end, they end. And I know for me, I'm always listening to the music. Doesn't matter what you're calling for patter. For me, I like to because I like to dance. And interestingly enough, there have been times when I have put on a piece of music because I wanted to listen to it, and all of a sudden I noticed that the cranky guy who never responds to anything is out tapping his feet. The one I use all the time, alternative, is Engelbert Humperdinck's Quando, Quando, Quando. I just like the beat of it. It's got that good beat. And the first time I used it at this particular dance, there was a gentleman, he never responded to anything. And I put the music on, and you're looking to make sure you know who's got whose corner, and I happened to, in the corner of my eye, and he was smiling, and his foot was tapping, and I thought, wow. It was really cool. Another one, I use the patter called Serengeti Sunrise, which sounds like an African plain. And I was using it at a dance in the fall, and this engineer, friend of ours, very stoic, he dances with his wife, and they get through, and I don't notice anything. She came up to me afterwards. She says, "You've got to play that piece of music again," because he was actually singing to this non-musical, he was laughing and cutting it up, and you really don't know what piece of music is going to touch somebody. And that's why I think I like using a wide variety of music and not the exact same thing all the time, because everybody likes something different. If you call circle left, let the people circle left for at least more than a beat. Circle left, Alaman left. Well, why'd you call circle left? Let them get the sense that they're doing something a little bit. Because it doesn't have to, the music doesn't have to be your enemy. There are a lot of people that use music really well, and it doesn't take that much longer to pick music appropriate to whatever you're trying to do. Especially in a singing call, I know a lot of times I'll want to use a particular figure in a particular singing call, but it just won't flow. Something just doesn't feel right, and it's probably because however you have to deliver that singing call doesn't match, like Jim had said, the melody or the feel of where you're going to do that singing call figure. And it's okay to find something that suits better. Whether it's another piece of music that you can use that particular figure to, or another figure altogether. I just think there's a lot of ways that we could be a lot better at making sure that that music is a part of our shtick and not just something that's in the background. We'd certainly like to open it up if anybody has any questions or comments. We have about 15 minutes. So does anybody have any questions? Comments? Anybody at all? Yep, and if you would just say your name and where you're from, please.
Steve Anderson from Winston-Salem, North Carolina here. Do you have any suggestions, or could you give some titles of some music that you would use for good patter that's modern?
Don't look at me and Jim. Well, okay. I'll play a few of my favorites, because I have some really odd things. Right, Steve? Okay. So one that I use a lot, I like to start a dance with it because I think it's kind of happy, is Rigadigga. Let me find it. It's under R. And, yeah, now you don't know that it's R on my machine. And the reason I like it is because, whew, that's loud. Let's try that again. Is when it puts it on, I start smiling. It's kind of modern sounding, but not so modern that it's not approachable. And it really makes me want to dance. And it's got a good beat. It's not way out there. I mean, some stuff is way out there. So that's one. That's Rigadigga Royal 416. Let's see. Another person that does, I think he does a good job with patter, is Riverboat. I have quite a few Riverboats. Something that's a little different. This is another reel. You don't hear very many of them. This is called Riverboat Reel. It's Riverboat 272. And again, 6/8 time. It's something that you wouldn't hear very often. It sounds kind of modern. It doesn't sound like something way back when. And I put this on, and before I start calling, the dancers are doing little Irish step dancing and things like that. It's just a kind of fun. It's just kind of an interesting thing. That's Riverboat Reel. I'll play you a little bit that Serengeti Sunrise. 272. Let's see. So this one. Yeah.
While you're looking for the next one, Patty, would you use that reel you just did for a standard modern Western hoedown tip, patter tip?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's it. They will skip through it, yeah. Right, okay, thank you.
The whole key is you kind of have to adjust what you're going to call to them and how you deliver it. I'm not going to be, I'm going to kind of deliver it with a little bit of pep in my step and be aware of that. And with the 6/8, right. So Serengeti Sunrise, this one's MR, Mountain Records 5027. And I use this if I just need to go someplace to a happy place because it kind of sounds like every Disney movie that's ever been made. It's going to start odd, but so just picture yourself. You're on that plane. And you kind of have to wait a little bit, but then you do a circle left and it kind of starts a little bit. And you let them circle for a little bit and you do a thar or something. And eventually it gets into it doesn't even get very exciting, but it's kind of a nice way to do something that's a little bit more modern. It's not something the dancers would expect. This just sends me to my happy place. To my happy place. It doesn't have a real strong melody line, so if you're not real good at finding a melody, you can talk it, you can whisper it, you can just go along however you want to do. I'm a child of the 70s. Sorry. And so I like some 70s music, and recently, let's see, Royal released, where is it? I had a dancer, they just couldn't believe that we were dancing to this piece of music. Royal 426, I don't think it's out yet. This is called the Royal Boogie Hoedown, Earth, Wind, and Fire, which to me is current. It's different. For the generation that's dancing now, it's kind of somewhat relatable. And it's got a real good beat that you can use an alternative piece of music without having Earth, Wind, and Fire talking in your background. I use a lot of alternative also, and the big one that dancers love. I have two versions of it. The first is it's called Last Night, and it was by the Marquis, and this is the original Marquis version. The year I was born. So this is the original Marquis version.
That's nice.
And a right and left grand. You know, you got to work at it to get it to work there. Well, there's also a round dance by Chris Anderson with it's the same song. Bow to your partner and bow to your corner. Join hands, circle left. It's just got a lot of that contemporary sounding, and the dancers, even people who you would think would never dance to anything but Chicken in the Straw, they love this song. Steve found me one. He likes to find alternative music. He's always finding things. This one is, how many of you know Mustang Sally? I know there's a singing call out. I got a little frustrated with the singing call because I just really loved the song and it just didn't do it for me. Steve found a music -1 saxophone practicing. And it's like karaoke for saxophone. And this one has a definite refrain. And what's interesting is the dancers really respond to this because they go, Mustang Sally, throw your Mustang down. And it's just a way to introduce something that's just a little bit different. But again, you're not way out in left field doing something that your dancers are going to shut down on. They hear the beat and they're done. It's safe. And again, you got to, like Ted's a master at it, you got to kind of know the song so you know where to put in an Allman left, you know where to put in a right and left grand, something busy, something not busy. I mean, those are just a couple. I guess my recommendation is as you listen to music, you know, it could be that you just don't like the piece of music. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know I've bought patter records, and I forget. I put them on, and I'm like, oh, that's right. This one really just doesn't make my foot tap. If I'm listening to a piece of music, and at the end, when I was getting the tape service, if at the end of the snippet my foot was still tapping and I wasn't on to what the traffic was doing or where I needed to go, and I was still listening to the song, that was a pretty good gauge for me. If you've got kids, even adults, Madagascar. It's got a good beat. Sides, face, grand, square. You know, you got to time it well. But it's something that's a little bit more contemporary, and even my grandparent dancers who have watched all the Disney movies with their kids go, oh, I know this song. It's clean. It's not too weird. It's got a good beat, and that beat is good through the whole thing. I think it's really a matter of personal preference. People just respond to things that are different. We have a Jewish couple, an Israeli couple dancing in our area. And he came up to me and he said, have you ever used any Israeli music? I can honestly say no. I tried using a Hava Nagila I found, and it just didn't work. And he wanted me to use this piece of music. Which is, there's a beat. It's kind of quiet. It's called Childhood Landscape. It's in a foreign language. You don't know what the words are, so it's not like the words are going to interrupt, right? He's talking about going back to his childhood home and having really good feelings about it. And I said, I'll play. If a dancer comes to me with a piece of music, I'll try it. The dancers loved this. It was just one of those, we're dancing to an Israeli piece of music, but it's got a pretty good beat. Nobody would ever play it, I don't think. For me, it's the beat. For Steve, it's the beat. He's always, if he hears a piece of music, he'll tap his finger. And if Steve can find a beat, and it's not, okay, I'm not, where do I put my, okay, and I'm not exactly sure where to put my foot down, then it's fair game. If it's something that resonates with you. You know, and that's my recommendation is it's really got to be something that resonates with you, because if you like the music that you're using, it's going to reflect in your calling. And if it reflects in your calling, your dancers are going to respond to that. I mean, I've put music on and forgotten and picked it up and put on something else when they get in their square, because I remember that piece of music is just agonizing. I don't know if those are of interest or helpful, but those are some of the ones that I happen to have on my laptop. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Jeanette Stoible, Zurich, Switzerland. I would like to have from you guys suggestions for newer callers how to work on chanting, because this is actually working with the music.
We'll defer.
My suggestion is to start with a metronome, or if you can get some kind of a steady beat. I don't know offhand where there is, but a metronome, really, set the tempo and let it play and start trying to say, even to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, to learn how to make your voice fit with the rhythm, any rhythm. Square dance rhythm is a steady boom, 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 boom. And you can make it boom-pa-ta, 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 boom, but it's still boom, 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 boom. And chanting with starting to just count first, and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or 1, 2, 3, then start saying head 2 couples right and left through. I will also offer the suggestion that back in 1966, I wrote a textbook for my square dance callers class that I was running. There was nothing written for training callers at that time, and I wrote a textbook. It was fairly long. The opening section on that was music and how to use it, and it went into great detail on the various ways the call rhythm can fit with the music. That book is available online at the Square Dance Foundation of New England website. If you go on there, you'll find Jim Mayo text 1966, and it's broken down by chapters. The first chapter is music, and it goes into considerable detail on how to do just that.
Chuck Hess, High Point, North Carolina. If she'll go back and get last year's MP3s, Debbie did a session on that at Nashville on chanting.
Deborah Carroll Jones, yes. We don't call her Debbie. Yeah, if you did that and you're still walking out, well, I see the cane, but... Yeah. But yes, that's a very good resource too, yes.
And another thing helpful for newer callers is to listen to the radio, and instead of singing the song, see if you can hear a da 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 da, da 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 da. Just see if you can start to hear the major. There's 3. There's a whole bazillion of them, but basically the major, and see if you can deliver square dance calls just while you're driving down the road. And once you get kind of that rhythm in you, it's a lot easier to translate it into square dance music. We are almost done. Anyone else?
Thank you. Wayne Weston, Canyon Lake, Texas. A couple of songs that I use for singing calls, because I like to give a big variety of stuff, is Volcano on, I think it's Prairie. It's a cha-cha rhythm. And I do let's see, it'd be was it a 40-beat grand square? Because it's in cha-cha rhythm. And the crowd just goes crazy. They love it.
How do you make grand square if it's 40 beats?
It's turn on 5.
5
It's
beats.
1, 2, cha-cha, turn. 1, 2, cha-cha, turn. Works great. They love it. It fits. And the delivery part of it is not talking. Let them dance. Another one that I just found in my box the other day is on hi-hat. I don't remember the number, but it's Cuanto Le Gusta. It's a samba. It's a samba. Variety.
I think variety is wonderful if we don't overdo it. That's,
Mike Oliveri, Denver, Colorado. One of the things, I'm kind of like Patty, okay? I do the music that I grew up with. And some of the music that I hear on the radio that I think would be ideal for patter, before I do it at a dance, I'll do it at a lesson. And I'll tell my dancers, this is a brand new piece of music, I want to test it on you. Let me know if you like it or you don't. And they will tell you. And the music that I think is great, they'll come up and say, we can't dance to it. And it's like, oh. But don't be afraid to ask your dancers to let you know.
Well, thank you for being here. We hope you got something, a little piece of information. It truly is about remembering that music is just as much a part of your program as your patter is. And let your dancers dance. That's what they're there for. If it's an open dance, that's what they're there for. They're there to dance. You save your beat-ups for workshops or, when you're having class. But at an open dance, let them dance and let them enjoy themselves. So thank you for your attention. Have a great afternoon, and I think we're on to a break, and then there'll be another sessions at 4. Yeah. Big round of applause for Johnny Wedge and Jim Mayo. They did a great job.